Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show as we hit the tail end of summer. Even though in summer a lot of things slow down in the news, there's still plenty going on, and we'll be covering a whole lot of that. We got a new fixture in the office. Jeremy, you can see over my shoulder over there. We've switched some folks around, and we'll have a little bit of a difference in the news check-in in a short time. So be sure to send an email and say hi to Jeremy there. We got... from the Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano is going to come on and talk about some polling those guys have done on whether or not Canadians want to get rid of the bureaucracy. And we'll have a news check-in and some other things going on soon. I do want to mention, so I was in Longview. Well, yeah, I was in for a short time in Longview last weekend, and we mentioned that with Dave during the news check-in. Jane has a thing she sets up at farmers markets, things like that. And I said on the show that I would be there, and I was. I helped Jane set up and I helped her break down, but I didn't state it clearly enough. I guess a couple of folks actually came out to meet me at that, and I wasn't there. And I feel terrible about that. I didn't phrase it very well. So please accept my apologies. And honestly, send an email to the Standard. I know you drove all the way to Longview. It's a nice drive. I mean, I bet that, but I'll grab you a coffee. Honest, if you reach out, I'll make up for that. I appreciate and flattered that you'd come that far just to try and say hi. And I will be, I promise, I really will be at Mirror on September 1st for Alberta Day, so it wouldn't be just a table carrying my honey there at that. All right, let's get on with what I'm going to rant about today. Yes, I see you guys in the comments scroll too. Tracy, Kim, Henry. This is live. Be sure to share your thoughts, comments. It's an interactive show that really helps with things. So I'm going to talk about communism here, guys. It's been 36 years. Yeah, some of us gray enough to remember it. The world witnessed the fall of the Berlin Wall on their TV sets. The wall was a symbol of the repressive nature of communism, and its fall was the beginning of the end of communism in Europe. The Soviet Empire crumbled soon afterwards, and while Eastern Europe still struggles with some elements of freedom and democracy, it's incontrovertible they're much better off now than they had been under communist leadership. But unfortunately, as time passes, it's being forgotten just how odious communism was. The siren call of a fantasy world of happiness and equality under an all-controlling, benevolent government that's offering communism is actually starting to take hold on the younger generation. And it's going to end really poorly for the Western world if this sick ideology isn't countered decisively and soon. It's a mind rot that festers until fools manage to actually implement communism to prove yet again that it's an untenable system that offers nothing but corruption, suffering, and death. Without active communist states to serve, though, as an example to the West, it becomes easier for people to forget the ills of the system. Generation X, of which I'm a part, grew up with the imagery of people risking their lives as they climbed the Berlin Wall while being shredded with razor wire and fearing a bullet from a Soviet soldier. We watched people desperately building ramshackle rafts and try to reach Florida from Cuba, and many died on that trip. The most effective voices against communism were those who'd actually lived in it and endured it. They counseled their children about what they suffered and what they must never happen again. They offered stories and experiences to help a generation visualize what it was like living in a system where the state controlled every aspect of your life to the point where you're actually willing to risk your life to escape it. Now those people are senior citizens, and their grandchildren are being indoctrinated by an education system dominated by privileged idealists who speak of the ills of capitalism while earning six-figure incomes and living in gated communities. The education system doesn't tell students how communism killed 148 million people between 1917 and 1987. Instead, it rails against capitalism, which created the highest standard of living within the most peaceful and free nations on earth. Polling is now indicating that younger North American people are assuming an increasingly negative view of capitalism. They really don't know where their bread's buttered. They've been taught that capitalism is responsible for all the ills from social inequity to financial inequity to unhappiness. They really need to try a little time on a Soviet breadline. The consequences of this shift are dangerous and real. Socialist Zoran Mamdani easily won New York City's Democratic mayoral primary on a platform of state-run grocery stores and a rental freeze. He may very well become the mayor of one of the largest cities on earth, and his policies are going to be a catastrophe. Socialism is the kissing cousin of communism. Socialist policies are used as incremental steps towards communism. And as socialism creeps in more deeply, authoritarianism always follows. China began reforms to move from pure communism in the late 70s. That led to economic growth, but they never shed the authoritarianism. Governments never willingly grant new freedoms. Those have to be taken back by citizens. People who value freedom, people with talent, people with ambition all chafe under socialism, and they try to flee it. That's why it's only communist countries that actually have to block citizens from leaving their nations. We never saw people trying to move into North Korea, and folks aren't taking rafts from the United States to make a new life in Venezuela. Communism only works in theory, and when those who have experienced it fade away, the theorists theorists dominate again, and they're in academia, and they're dominating the discourse. Universal basic income policies. That's the latest thing the socialists are pushing. They're using the excuse of AI impacts on the economy to pitch making every single citizen dependent upon the state through welfare payments in a UBI scheme. Some claim that economist Milton Friedman supported a UBI system, but they're misrepresenting what he was pitching. His vision involved a negative income tax system with a vision of a shrinking government, the size and scope of it getting ever smaller. And it's not going to happen. His approach is as unrealistic as the contemporary proponents of the system. What it will do is create a massive class of parasites, while the productive will be squeezed harder to sustain them until the system collapses. Survivors of communism didn't just teach us about the economic failures of communism. They related the life of fear, living within an authoritarian society, the secret police, the lack of personal freedoms. But look at it now. Many of today's youth didn't think twice when complying to COVID reactions. The state learned how easily compliant citizens have become, and authoritarians now even ban citizens from not walking in the woods. 40 years ago, moves like that would have led to a mass protest from the young, who learned at the feet of their parents what the dangers of authoritarianism are. Now they just shrug and stay confined to their quarters, play video games without question as ordered by the state. Young, ambitious people who value freedoms are supposed to be our bulwark against creeping authoritarianism. Now they're docile and compliant. We should be reaching out to the survivors of communism to speak one more time. Get out there, guys. There should be a public education push to remind every generation that no matter how appealing communism might appear to the vacuous at a glance, it has a 100% failure rate. It's a part of history that we can't afford to repeat. All right. That's where I wanted to go, guys. Communism is like herpes. It's never gone. At best, it goes into remission for a little while. All right. So I've got today a substitute Dave, and that's Dave Winnick from the Newsroom coming in to speak for the other Dave. How's it going?
Not too bad. How you doing, Cory?
Right on. Good. So you've moved from back, we got Jeremy back there now. Your claim to fame was the acuity and skill with which you destroyed some Shanghai noodles back there.
Finally on this side of the glass for a change.
There you go. And you write some excellent news stories, and you've been very prolific since coming here not too long ago. So welcome to the show. Thanks. And looking forward to your update. So what's happening in the newsroom right now?
Well, I guess starting off the bat, Dave Naylor, our editor-in-chief, he's going to, or actually he's in Vancouver at the moment. And I think he's there for about a week or two, I think. And apparently Air Canada now, starting, I think it's going to be tomorrow, is going to start canceling flights going forward for the weekend. I think there's going to be about 10,000 flight attendants that are ready to walk off the job. Apparently they're talking about poverty wages, and I guess talks with the union in Air Canada broke down. So we'll see if Dave's going to be back in 2 weeks or not, I guess.
I think you've been driven out there, though, didn't you?
I have no idea, actually. No one
driving back.
Nobody even knew if he was even out there for 2 weeks or if it was just a week, but I guess it's 2 now. So
it might expand. He'll take that excuse, even if he's got his car there.
Exactly.
But I think those flight attendants were offered something like a 38% raise, and they still said no.
Well, I think it was too. It was kind of weird as well because they aren't getting paid for anything except when they're airborne. So it's like, when they're boarding and that, they don't even get paid, apparently, they were saying.
That's what they claimed, yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I guess we'll find out when talks sort of resume, I guess, whenever that's going to be.
Yeah, it sounds like there might be, the government's going to have to step in probably on that one. That's the joys that come when the government says, okay, we're going to take away the ability to have replacement workers. Well, then all of the, in federally regulated areas, it means that the feds are going to have to step in pretty much every time there's a strike.
Well, you would assume as much, yeah.
Oh, well, I hope too many people don't have flying plans this week.
I sure don't, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, I'm not going anywhere.
Anyways, in other news, our Christian artist Sean Foyt, that's been causing a bunch of controversy or whatnot recently with sort of his mega affiliations and whatnot, and Let Us Worship concert in all over the country. Apparently, he's going to be doing one at the Alberta legislature grounds on the 22nd, which is only the second one that hasn't been canceled so far in the whole country. I think the first one that wasn't also canceled was in Saskatoon on the 21st. So I guess we'll see what happens there, if there's going to be protesters or what the deal is.
Well, carry on, guys. You've taken a guy who nobody'd really heard of aside from a tiny
I hadn't, yeah.
Chased him all over, but I'm sure it's probably going to be packed at what events he manages to hold.
Well, you would assume as much because it is apparently supposed to be free. I don't know if the other ones were, but this one is, according to what data we've gotten.
Well, hopefully if it gets stupid, it's still safe at least. We don't need the nutcases getting too
hopefully it's a turning point, so we don't have any, exactly, people getting rambunctious. And also, lastly, speaking of communism, China, tariffs on Canadian canola apparently are going to start on Thursday, 75.8%. What do you think about that?
Well, you get me going. Eh?
Might as well.
Well, it says a lot. It's the usual thing because this is all coming about because Carney, I think that was under Trudeau actually. They put a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles to protect an electric vehicle manufacturing market that Canada doesn't actually have.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, now Western Canadian farmers are paying the price for it. as China retaliates at us. So good move, Mr. Carney. You're really shaking up things with that. Your fine diplomacy and economic work. And as usual, Westerners pay the bill.
Yeah, exactly. Well, someone you were saying had to do with electric car tariffs or something whatnot from China. Do we even import that many electric cars from China?
No,
I don't think so. That's why. Yeah, that's why I don't really understand what the whole deal is.
And we don't manufacture many in Canada either. We've failed. We keep pumping money into battery plants and everything. I guess they figure if they could just ban enough competition, ban the production of regular cars, starve the Western farmers enough, suddenly the market will blossom for this Canadian-made electric vehicles.
Oh, hopefully.
I'm holding my breath. We're going to be like Cuba, we're going to have those old combustion engine vehicles that'll be worth a lot. We've got to keep them up because we can't get new ones. Either way, I do feel for our farmers suffering under that. I mean, it's harvest time. That's our prime customer.
Oh yeah, and we exported. I think it was $5 billion or whatnot in 2023. I think it was $5 billion worth.
Yeah,
it's huge
between the U.S. and China. That's where most of it goes.
Yeah, I think it was what was it? 4.5 million tons. So that's $3.8 billion. So that's crazy.
Yeah, and it's not like farmers can change their mind at this point in the season and say, "Well, we'll seed something else."
Yeah, exactly.
You're kind of committed at this point. Well, hope for resolution. Anything else you're working on before I let you go? What's coming up?
Oh, got a few things down the pipeline. You'll just have to wait and see, Cory.
Oh, geez, that doesn't help. We're handing out teasers. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the check-in.
I appreciate it as well,
I'll
Cory.
let you get back in there working on that news copy that you do so well. So.
Will do. Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
So yes, this is why we can afford to have two Daves, is because you guys have been subscribing, and we don't take tax dollars. We are an independent news outlet. We are subscription-based, guys. This is where I got to nag you and remind you, please get on there, westernstandard.news/subscribe. Take one out. It's $10 a month, $100 for a year, and it keeps us independent and accountable to you with these stories, with this stuff. And as you can see, I mean, our staff is just expanding. There really is an appetite for truly independent media out there. So if you've already subscribed, thank you very much. And if you haven't yet, come on, keep subscribing. If we get enough subscribers, we could probably get a third Dave back there. I mean, you can never have enough Daves in a newsroom. So let's just see what else is going on here out there. Interesting things. The parliamentary session is going to be quite something when it comes up. I see the Conservatives are really kind of coming out swinging. They are. There's the Canadian Sovereignty Act that Pierre Poilievre is going to put out there to kind of push and encourage, I imagine, Carney and the Liberals to move on things, because they really keep talking a big game, but they aren't doing anything. And Bill 5 is all talk, but he always puts a caveat. Oh, as long as we have consensus. Well, in other words, that nothing's going to get done. So, the Canadian Sovereignty Act for the Conservatives, it's not going to pass. It won't. That's the way it works in our parliament. But at least hopefully it can dominate the discussion. And I see Michelle Rimple Garner. She's pushing out, saying they want to eliminate two-tier justice by, this will be interesting, prohibiting judges from factoring in a non-citizen's immigration status when determining sentences. Sounds so bizarre, but we might remember that story not too long ago with that sick fellow. No, I didn't mean it sick in the Sikh sense. I meant actually sick, because he tried to buy services from a 15-year-old girl and was charged with that. And the judge said, well, we'll kind of lay off on that because I wouldn't want to mess with your potential citizenship application. Like, what? Isn't this kind of a no-brainer? One of the people we would rather not have here. But is that screwy to that point where we'll actually have politicians say maybe we actually have to make laws to stop judges from doing that? But then you got to think of the consequences. We don't want legislators actually micromanaging judges. That's a slippery slope to go into as well, and could cause more damage than good. But it just, I guess it's giving us an idea of what the flavor of the parliament is going to be in a month when it reopens. And I got a feeling it's going to be a pretty lively one. Good for guys like me anyways, who are always looking for more rant-worthy material and stuff to cover. And we're in for interesting times, if nothing else. All right, let's bring somebody else in who's no stranger to ranting and talking about common sense things for the most part. We've got Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation on deck. Hey, Franco, how's it going?
Hey, Cory. Good to be with you, man.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's about time.
Yeah, I love it. Let's get into some ranting and raving.
Cool. Well, like one of the things you might have heard me ranting about a bit is Carney is good at talking, but not really good at doing. And they have hinted at possibly reducing the size and scope of the bureaucracy out there, though they haven't done anything yet. But I see you guys have been more proactive. You did some polling on what Canadians might think of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, like the federal bureaucracy is so bloated. right? Okay, like the federal government added 99,000 extra government bureaucrats since 2016. 99,000 more federal paper pushers, right? But it's not just the number of bureaucrats that have gone up, so have the costs. Okay, the cost of the federal bureaucracy has ballooned 77% since 2016. It is outrageous. Now, we asked Leger to do 2 polls for us. Okay, the first poll, very simple, ask Canadians, do you think the government should cut, increase, or maintain the size of the bureaucracy? And like, look, the polling results show that more than half of Canadians said it's time to cut the size and cost of the bureaucracy. Only 4% of Canadians said that it should be increased. So I guess even some of the government bureaucrats are looking around their offices and being like, yeah, there's some fat to cut. But like, look, if you remove people who are unsure or don't know, a total of 66% or 2/3 of Canadians are saying enough is enough. Take out the scissors. It's time to trim the fat in Ottawa.
So just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, I mean, if they cut too much, they cut too quickly, wouldn't everybody suffer and be under, a terrible pressure due to all the lack of all those government services provided?
You mean the federal services could get worse than what they are now? Is that what you're saying, Cory?
I don't know. There's always room to get worse.
Look, it's a great segue into the next question that Leger asked, okay? Because, when I talk about the cost of the bureaucracy, I always got to say, like, ask yourself, are you getting 77% better services from the federal bureaucracy? And it turns out the answer to that question is a big fat no, right? So the Leger poll, the second question, found that 50% of Canadians think services have gotten worse since 2016, okay? Only 11% said that services have gotten better since 2016, but even the majority of those people still say that services should be better than what they have. So, you asked me, well, if they cut off a bunch, if they lay off a bunch of bureaucrats, fire a bunch of bureaucrats, will services get worse? Well, I got to put that question back to the government union bosses that are fear-mongering right now over potential savings and be like, hey, hold on a second. The cost of the bureaucracy has gone up significantly for Canadian taxpayers, and yet services are still dismal. Okay, so I look at the numbers and I'm like, holy, like this is such a bloated government, and clearly adding more bureaucrats doesn't mean better results for Canadians.
No, and a parallel to it, which is, kind of, it's a different discussion kind of, but it offers a good parallel. Our Canada Post workers, whereas, we aren't getting more postal service than we ever did. In fact, we're using less than we ever have, but the cost of the institution is rising higher and higher. And I've been a little vocal online about my thoughts on postal workers and perhaps how they should seek newer employment. But the union types and everything keep saying, well, you'll pay even more when they're all on welfare. How could we lay them off? It would mess with the entire economy. They contribute so much through their taxes. That argument's going to come from the bureaucracies and their unions as well, right?
Well, hold on a second, though, right? The average compensation for a federal bureaucrat, the average is $125,000 a year. So no, we're not going to be paying more when and if the government cuts its bureaucracy, right? Like, come on. I mean, look, the bureaucracy is consuming more than half of the government's operating budget. And to a point that I think you're getting at, there's just certain things that we don't need the government to be doing, right? We don't need to have essentially a government monopoly handing out mail, right? Like, come on, we got email. We've had email for a very long time. We definitely don't need a government monopoly. We don't need a government state broadcaster. Okay, we don't need the government losing hundreds of millions of dollars trying to operate a train company, i.e. via rail, right? So there's just so many different things that we don't need any government to be doing, and we especially don't need a government in Ottawa to be doing.
So what about areas? I mean, one of the larger ones, and they just went on strike last year, I believe was CRA workers. That's a large section of the government. I mean, arguably, that is an area where we will need a degree of bureaucrats. And I think most people agree they don't really work very efficiently whatsoever. But how do you begin cutting in there?
Well, look, one of the problems, and I mean, the CRA highlights the overall problem of the federal bureaucracy to a T, right? Where the CRA has seen the second largest growth in its number of bureaucrats among all the different departments and agencies since 2016. And yet services are still poor. Right? You've heard the taxpayer ombudsperson talk about the fact that the office is flooded with complaints, right? So good luck trying to get the CRA on the phone when they inevitably mess up one of your tax returns. You know what I mean? So this is like the pure example to show that more government bureaucrats does not mean better services, where you've seen the payroll of the CRA explode in recent years, like higher and higher cost of taxpayers, and yet the services have gotten no better. I mean, Cory, let me also talk about another aspect here, right? Because it's not just the number of government bureaucrats that has gone up, but the cost has as well. Because over the last 4 years, the federal government has rubber stamped over 1 million pay raises over the last 4 years. The federal government has rubber stamped $1.5 billion in bonuses since 2015. And all these bonuses have been going on when departments can barely meet half of their own performance targets, right? Like that's like writing your own tests, getting a D-, and then giving yourself an $18,000 bonus check. I mean, Cory, let's talk about, probably the pinnacle of government waste over the last couple of years, Arrive Scam, right? That simple app launched with a price tag of $80,000. It ballooned all the way up to $60 million. It became a national scandal. And then government executives working on that failed app turned around and took home $340,000 in bonuses. So it's not just talking about cutting the number of bureaucrats. We got to talk about cutting the perks and pay of government bureaucrats as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's ridiculous when we start hearing some of those. We've been beating up on the federal bureaucrats quite a bit so far here, and they've earned their beating thoroughly. But and I know most of that poll is focused on federal, but there's plenty of room for provincial governments and civic governments to cut their bureaucracy as well, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is kind of the name of the game when you're looking at governments at all different levels and I guess across provinces and even cities, is that government bureaucracies is what make up a huge chunk of each type of government's budget. Right. And like, look, it all has to start at the top. I know I've been focusing on federal the most part, but we really have to focus on one more element here. And that's the political level, right? The politicians. Look, in Ottawa, our members of parliament give themselves a raise every single year. April 1, every year, they pad their pockets with higher pay from more of your money. And like, look, the government unions, before there was that major strike that happened back in 2023, like the government union bosses, they were pointing to the annual salary increase that members of parliament take every single year as a reason why bureaucrats should get more of taxpayers' cash. So not only is the government bureaucracy a huge problem at all level of government, but so is the political out of touchness, so to speak, for a lack of a better term, especially in Ottawa, where a backbencher, right, along with collecting dust in the House of Commons, is collecting a $210,000 salary. A minister's, right, salary north of 300 grand. The prime minister's salary north of 400 grand. And every single year they're giving themselves salary increases that they don't deserve. For example, why would a finance minister of Canada deserve a pay raise when every single year they're running deficits in the tens of billions of dollars? It makes no sense.
Well, and I think, something that happens with politicians in general at every level is they lose sight of whose money they're actually entrusted with. And it happens, there's a cross-partisan issue. We saw that come up recently, and you guys have been critical of it. The UCP government in Alberta decided that we don't deserve to see what their expenses are for MLAs and ministers. What on earth is going on there? What are they hiding?
That's a great question. Like, what on earth is going on there? Because they should know better, right? Like, come on, like they should know better. How many people in that UCP government had made a career going after government accountability, right? Come on, Cory, like you and I have been around for a little while now. Like we all remember that you have different members within that government. If another government would have done this, they would be losing their minds and they would be right to do so. Like, look, number one, to your point, what are you hiding, right? If you remove the receipt requirement from being online, like taxpayers have every right to be like, hey, what are you trying to hide from us? But number two, and the heart of the matter is this, it is not those politicians' money. It is the hard-earned money of Alberta taxpayers. And Alberta taxpayers have every right to know how their money is being spent. They have every right to be able to go online and proactively look at the receipts. So what we've seen from the Smith government on this issue here is completely the wrong move. And they have to come out, they got to apologize for the mistake, and they have to right this wrong.
Yeah, no, I certainly hope they reverse. Then I also wanted to bring up just to remind people, I mean, myself, I mean, speaking for myself, I typically like most of what the UCP does, but I'm going to hold them to account when they're wasting my money just as much as any other government. And we expect better of them. You claim to be conservative. You certainly were critical of them when the NDP was in power. And then it's just bizarre. I mean, how did they not see the political mine they were stepping on when they pulled this off?
Well, hey, Cory, before I came on the show, I called my colleague and a good friend of yours as well, Chris Sims, right, our Alberta director. And I was talking to her about what's going on with this receipt scandal. And she was also telling me some of the bogus claims that the government has been putting out there to try to defend its wrong decision. And she was telling me, like, they're even saying that there's like safety issues why they would take the receipts offline, right? And I'm just saying to myself, like, that does not pass the sniff test for 1 second. Like, Cory, you and I have gone out to restaurants or whatever. We've gotten receipts before. Never once has my receipt shown my own personal address, right? Number two, if you are worried about some type of security issue, well, I don't know, get a Sharpie, black out the location of the place that you were staying. It's that simple. All of this reminds me, that excuse reminds me of the Trudeau government, right? You'll remember the $6,000 per night hotel suite, and the federal government didn't want to tell you that it was Trudeau who stayed in that room. What excuse did they give? Security, right? So, like, look, I think the Smith government and really all governments across Canada should try to hold themselves to a much better standard than the Trudeau government when it comes to transparency.
Yeah, and almost all stay on their case. I mean, the absurdity of it too. It's not like the expenses were posted real time. If it shows what hotel you stayed in, it shows that you stayed there a month ago, not today. So people still don't know where you are right now. It's just, as you said, it was the sort of thing I'd expect out of a Liberal. So it's pretty disappointing. I hope they see the sense in this soon. One more thing, I see a press release came in that you guys have gotten something of a court win when it comes to that capital gains tax shenanigans going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, you remember when the federal government, they wanted to move, well, really the CRA said that they were going to move forward with this multi-billion-dollar capital gains tax increase, right? And the CRA was going to enforce it even before legislation was introduced in the House, debated in the House, or even passed into law, right? So immediately, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we launched a legal challenge to fight the undemocratic and illegal capital gains tax increase. Now, a week after we launched our legal challenge, the federal government announced that it was backing away from the capital gains tax increase. But we decided to continue with this legal challenge because we want to set the precedent. No taxation without representation, right? It's unelected bureaucrats shouldn't be deciding how much money to take from Canadians. The power of taxation has to be within our elected representatives in Parliament. Now, even though the federal government ultimately backed away from the capital gains tax increase, we are continuing to pursue this in the court to set that precedent. And, the court just ruled, as the press release kind of says, is that they're going to continue to hear our case, even though the other side didn't want that to happen. So we're pushing forward with this challenge to set that very important principle of our democracy: no taxation without representation.
Excellent. Well, I hope it goes through as you hope, and at least make it a little tougher for these guys to pull these kind of stunts. It's sad that we always have to be reactive, when they just won't act principally to begin with. So you guys, I mean, again, the Taxpayers Federation, you're great with holding their feet to the fire. Before I let you go, where can people find what you're up to and support you guys if they want to?
Well, Cory, thanks so much for having me on, man. Really appreciate it. Always fun to chat with you. Folks, head over to taxpayer.com. That's our website. Check out the newsroom. Got a bunch of great petitions on there. And if you want to follow us on social media, I mean, just type in Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and I'm sure you'll find us. But the best place to go to support us is taxpayer.com.
Right on. Thanks, Franco. I appreciate you joining us today and the work you guys do. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Hey, thanks, Cory.
All right, thanks. So once again, that's Franco Terrazzano with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. They really are a great group, guys. And what I do like is, as I pointed out too, they don't play favorites. They don't care if somebody's wasting your money. They're going to call them out. It doesn't matter which party. Perhaps some of them within them are a bit like me. You get even more angry when it's a party you personally prefer than others, though they are a nonpartisan organization. So check them out if you want to keep up on things. I mean, look at the things like the Teddy Awards they do and stuff, just to expose the amount of your money that's being wasted. That's kind of what I was getting at a little, when I asked, like, with these politicians. They honestly forget. I mean, people call it dome disease, or when we'd send them out federally, I'd call it auto-washed. It doesn't take a politician long to forget that they're entrusted with our money. It's not their money. They should instinctively feel that, you know, they're the steward of it. And that means that they should be as transparent as possible. It's not hard to post your bloody expenses. What on earth was the UCP government thinking? As I said, I would expect that of the NDP. I would expect that of the Liberals. I expected better of the UCP. But, you know, it's not one of those things where I say I'm going to storm out of the room, quit supporting which party or that. I don't know. I'm not a member of any party, but, you know, there's ones, as I said, I prefer over others. But, guys, this doesn't look good. And it was just so avoidable. What on earth were you thinking? Either way, welcome to politics, right? As I said, none of them are immune from it. And I know a lot of politicians, even on the left, some of them honestly do feel they're doing a service. I just think when they're in a little too long, they kind of lose vision of what they began with. I'm mixed on that. You know, term limits is something that's talked about a lot, because I think, you know, there's been a recognition that leaders, particularly, if they're in too long, they get too stale. They've lost what they were there for. Ralph Klein used to refer to it as the fire in his belly. I mean, he was arguably one of the most successful politicians in Canadian history, but his last few years, he was just kind of mailing it in. His term for it was that he'd lost, you know, he had the fire in the belly, but he didn't have it later. And it would have been probably better if he'd have just had 8 years as premier and then been done. But at the same time, you know, it's a discussion worth having. Shouldn't that decision be up to the electors, though? Do you force it? The problem with a term limit is, if you got a politician, you see that in the States, and they, you know, it's the president and they're on their second term, that final year they're in, they know they're done. And if they aren't a principled person, boy, if you really want to see somebody at the trough, or somebody who doesn't care what the voters think any longer, have somebody when they know they have absolutely no way to come back into that office. So when they got nothing to lose, then they can become even more dangerous. Lots of discussions worth having anyways. But part of it, hey, just keep holding their feet to the fire. So I think, again, talk to your UCP MLA. If those guys, honestly, this one is so stupid. I think they're going to reverse on that really quickly. I think. But if they don't, call your MLA, call whomever, and just say, guys, what the hell's the matter with you? I do not want to see Premier Nenshi. And if you pull stunts like that, that's how you're going to do it. Okay, let's get on to some more idiocy, where our tax money gets wasted and spent. The Toronto International Film Festival. And it's a big one, guys. Among film festivals, you know, there's some massive ones out there. Ones in Cannes and Sundance Film Festival down in the States. The Toronto International one is a big one. And it gets millions and millions and millions of tax dollars from all three levels of government out there. Federal, provincial, civic. And, you know, it brings a lot of people, brings a lot of attention. Should bring some responsibility too, though. So there was an entrance that was into it, and it was a documentary about an Israeli hero, a man who saved people from Hamas on October 7th, 2023. And it was a documentary of it. And the documentary, it wasn't a theoretical thing. It used footage from October 7th. It used footage from the cameras of the Hamas terrorists, because those terrorists were so proud of themselves as they murdered everybody and attacked a music festival and murdered families and household pets and everything else they did. They actually shot footage of it and shared it with everybody. They were proud of it. But apparently they've decided, well, we didn't get permission from Hamas to use that footage, so we're not going to allow that documentary to appear at this music festival. No, the reason they don't want it at the music festival is because it's something that's sympathetic to Jews. Let's quit beating around the bloody bush with these arseholes, all right? How much more of this have we got to see? I mean, they backed off enough at the Montreal Pride March where they actually banned Jewish Pride marchers from the group. They did. This isn't stuff to be made up. The extreme left has embraced the movements of Germany in the late 30s. They really have. They're targeting and attacking businesses. They're excluding Jewish people. We're not talking Israel. We're talking Jewish people in Canada. And it's being unchecked. We saw it recently with a Jewish man attacked on the streets, beaten in front of his own kids, the kippah pulled from his head and thrown down. A number of politicians certainly spoke up to condemn it. A bunch didn't. And then we still see the same liberals condemning Islamophobia over perceived things happening here and there, while we're seeing the number one group in Canada being assaulted. The number one hate crime charges in Canada are Jews by a long shot. But the extreme left that's in control of everything, well, they're feeding that. This bunch of clowns at the film festival, if they're going to take stances like that, they shouldn't be any bloody tax funding going to them. Fund yourself. Go to Hamas. Ask them for some money. See if they'll pay for your crap. Canada is just turning into an embarrassment. And, where do you go with it? Well, I'll tell you one area to go with it. I mean, that's going to be something interesting here. Tomorrow, there's going to be the court ruling. For some who have been watching Alberta news on, the dueling referendum questions, the applications to petition to get a question on a referendum to be put in front of Albertans. We had Fabio, the disgraced Redford era MLA, has his nothing burger question that he's putting forward to say, hey, Albertans, do you all just want to keep things the same? Really kind of wasting time and abusing the system, but I guess he's got the right to try and waste that time and do so. He's going to get 300,000 signatures within, now it's going to be 2.5 months. I doubt he's going to do it, but who knows? But on the other end, the real petition from the Alberta Prosperity Project, or the real question, where it's talking about asking Albertans if they want to leave and become a sovereign province. Now, the question isn't whether or not Albertans should or shouldn't. You know where I stand on that. But whether the question should even be put to Albertans. The Chief Electoral Officer of Alberta said, I got to put that to a judge, see if we're allowed constitutionally to ask that. What? So cowardice on the Chief Electoral Officer's part, but whatever. So that's gone before a judge, and they made the case last week as to whether or not we're even allowed to ask the question. Tomorrow he's going to say whether or not we're allowed to ask Albertans on that. I don't think it's going to stop the referendum no matter which way that judge rules on this. The segment of Albertans, which is 30% or more, that's a significant amount who want to go, and they're dedicated and they're working on it. They're not going to rest without having a referendum on it. And bottom line is, if it doesn't go through that route, I mean, we can hold it even if he doesn't rule it's constitutional. We can fight that out after the question is held. But I'm wondering if this judge is taking this into account. Because if he tells Alberta that we are not allowed to have the question on independence, it's also telling Quebec they aren't allowed as well. And we know in Canada, it's been kind of widely accepted since the 80s that Quebec has every right to ask their citizens whether they want to stay or go in a referendum. That's their right as Quebecers. Fair enough. But is a judge in Alberta ready to poke that hornet's nest? You can bet the independence movement in Quebec, and they are not gone, are watching this very, very closely. I strongly suspect the judge is going to say the question can go ahead, but we'll see. We're going to find that out tomorrow. Elaine, a commenter saying Montreal Pride reinvited the gay Jewish community group. Yes. I'm sorry if I didn't clarify that. I mean, they did exclude them. And then, of course, once the backlash hit hard enough, they changed their mind and said, oh, okay, we'll let the Jewish LGBTQ group march with us. I understand people distinguishing or claiming to distinguish between Israel and Jews and Zionists. They love using that to cloak it with just saying Jew. And especially when you see some of the hate coming out, just say Jew. Don't try to pretend it's a Zionist thing. But we saw that with Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek when she boycotted the traditional Hanukkah lighting in Calgary over this because she didn't want to look like she's supporting Israel. Guys, Hanukkah has been going on a lot longer than the current incarnation of Israel. It was a local religious observance of Jews, not Israelis. Difference, okay? Very tightly connected to Israel and Jews, of course. But for her to boycott that, no, her problem was with the Jews. Let's not beat around that bush. Because it was a Hanukkah lighting, not a menorah lighting. Not anything to do with Israel. These guys cloak. If nothing else has come out from the horrors that were pulled off by Hamas, those vile terrorists, is it really exposed that you don't have to scratch that hard on the extreme left and the extreme right to find the Jew hater underneath. The Venn diagram of hate overlaps in there. And neither of them can claim to be the bigger hater of the other because they both do a very fantastic job of it. but these games that are going on, quit pretending it's about Israel, guys. It's this group that wanted to march in that parade were just Jewish people, many of whom were born in Canada, never been to Israel, had no interest in being in Israel, but they happened to be gay and they wanted to take part in the pride thing. And you guys stopped them for a while. You thought you could get away with stopping them without that much backlash. And likewise, I mean, the absurdity of this film festival to use that shaky excuse, oh, we didn't get Hamas's permission to use that footage, so we can't put it on. They put it out on themselves in public, guys. And who cares? Hamas, they're a terrorist group. It's absurd. Let's see, back on the independence end of things, though, the PPC, Maxime Bernier, has endorsed the yes side if there's going to be a referendum held in Alberta, and condemns what he called imperial federalism. So it's interesting. It's a new policy. That would, there's some policy that sounds interesting. That would abolish all federal programs and regulations intruding on areas of provincial responsibility. It says, and we have a lot of that problem. The Health Act, things like that. The feds are really getting into a lot of things they shouldn't. But would endorsing the yes side be a better way to go? I got to admit, like I liked a lot of things that Bernier did. I like a lot of things he stood up for. He was one of the only ones that stand up against supply management, things like that. But it really seems like the PPC to a degree now is just treading water and just trying to find stances to stay on to keep, funding themselves and keep Maxime with a job. I mean, not that I oppose their supporting independence. I'm supportive of independence too. But where are you going? What I think I see is that they see most of their donors are in Western Canada and tend to be independent supporters, so they want to keep them happy and keep the donations coming. They're just not making an impact or a mark in any elections. The by-election's coming up pretty soon. I guess I should note that. That's been going on in Alberta. That's where Pierre Poilievre is running, and to get himself a seat after having lost one. It's funny, the hypocrisy again of the left. They were pretty quiet when they had Nenshi bounced up into Edmonton to a safe seat where he doesn't live to get himself a seat as a party leader. But now that Poilievre's doing it, it's outrageous. It's wrong. I understand that, yes, he lost his original seat. So what? Does that mean that you are not allowed to pursue another one? Guys, you haven't read much political history or seen how the parliamentary system works. And he is the leader of the opposition. He needs a seat. That sort of stuff happens. Is it the most democratic thing? No, I don't think it is. Is it really totally fair to the local constituents that they lose a local representative? No, not really. But it's also not the outrage some people are making of it. But I read a CBC article. Yeah, I know. I read these things, but I got to keep up on stuff. I mean, most of my week is reading and consuming and watching and bringing stuff up so I can write about it and do these shows on it. And the CBC went up there and really worked hard because they sought out to find a few farmers who actually said, yeah, I don't like Poilievre and I think I'm going to vote for a different party this time around. Look, guys, the Conservatives win in that riding with like 80% support numbers. It's not going to change. Even if somehow it's a by-election and nobody comes out and the long ballot annoyed enough people, he might drop to 75%, maybe 70%. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. But it shows as well that the CBC went to so much trouble to assign somebody for such a long hit piece, just trying to find somebody in the farm community who didn't like Poilievre. I wonder how many doors they had to knock to find that. Speaking of fools in Canada and being ethically broken, we've been watching, and there's fair enough, some degree of debate on whether or not, not too much, whether or not it's a bright idea to ban everybody from the woods, from the forests in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, because the fire hazard's very high. Apparently people fart fire, and it might just spark one up if they let people walk in there unsupervised. So they just closed it off. It's public land, guys, public. Yes, ours. I can understand shutting down ATVs, vehicles, campfires, of course, things like that, even banning smoking in there, any lit. Yeah, I can see that. Bring down some rules. It's dangerous, fine. But people can't even walk in there. Oh, wait. Unless you're Indigenous. Yes, of course we should have known. They're not going to, it applies to everybody but the First Nations. As usual, there's going to be a Mi'kmaq-led play in a park that nobody else is allowed into right now. But since they're Indigenous, well, we'll look the other way on that ban. We'll let them in. Race-based policy, guys, is wrong. 100% of the time, always. There used to be a bunch of race-based policy that was wrong, and it was oppressing Native people in Canada. There used to be people weren't allowed to leave their reserves without the authority of an Indian agent. They weren't allowed to vote until later on. This was all wrong. But turning it around to make preferential race-based policy for them later doesn't undo the wrongs of the past. It's just committing more wrongs for the future. It's dividing us further. And it's making a damn mess. And you better hope these morons with their play don't start a fire, or you'll really look like idiots, won't you? This is nuts. Yes, this is so important. We're going to lock Canadian citizens away from all public areas in the trees and bush, except for a theater troupe of Indigenous people. Oh my God, you wimps, you pussies. Look, if you're really going to step on rights, step on all of ours. Don't racially selectively do it, you idiots. Either way, I got to leave off on that bright note. But there's lots of bright stuff to look forward to. Guys, watch The Pipeline tonight. We'll be on with a panel there. Nigel has stepped back. He's not full-time anymore, but he's still going to be doing columns. He's going to be on The Pipeline. He's doing his show. And, thank you for tuning in today and supporting us and supporting the growing number of Daves we have in our newsroom. So we will see you again next week at this time.